What started off as a men's liberation movement intent on challenging the concept of masculinity as a social construct quickly evolved into a cesspool of misogyny and hate against women who are perceived as the source of all evil, the oppressive force keeping men down. The Manosphere has come a long way, from a well-intentioned 70s movement to a money-making scam on TikTok called Looksmaxxing, which, if you pay close attention, is just a weird gay fixation. And I think that's kind of funny. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. First and foremost, I have to say this video was meant to be very different. I originally wanted to do a deep dive on the Manosphere, as I mentioned in my videos before, but as soon as I started doing some research and looking into it, I realized that it would be impossible for me to do so in just one video. The more I looked into it, the more creeped out I got. The roots of the Manosphere can be traced back to a men's liberation movement which emerged at the same time as the second wave of feminism, right around the time when the gay liberation movement was also gaining traction. But it quickly evolved into the men's rights movement, which included the men's rights activists who shifted the blame of men's problems onto women, female empowerment, and feminism. From then on, several other subcultures emerged, such as men going their own way, advocating for male separatism, pickup artists who taught men how to conquer women, treating them as prizes, as objects, to probably the most known of all, the incel community, a group of nihilistic, very violent men who see themselves to be beyond redemption, salvation in a society that has condemned them to eternal rejection based on pseudoscience. Some have been black-pilled, which is a funny play on the red pill concept, which we all know comes from The Matrix, which is a trans allegory that toxic men have adopted for themselves to signify an awakening to political and social biases against men, which is quite ironic considering we live in a patriarchal society that, is controlled by men, prioritizes men, and ultimately benefits men in any shape and form that it comes. But then I arrived to the Looksmaxxing movement, which I hadn't realized was such a widespread concept that is being widely adopted by men everywhere, from the biggest incels you could find to the most subtle of pickup artists who are there just to make a quick buck. See, incels for the most part have grown to accept that they're beyond salvation. Their genetics have predetermined them to be outcasts in society, women will never find them attractive or want to copulate with them, and instead of looking at it as their own insecurities and dealing with them in a healthy way, the solution is to turn that frustration into violent acts against not only themselves, but others. The best example of this violence jumping from the online subcultures of Reddit into real life was the 2014 case of Elliot Rodger, a self-described incel who went on a violent rampage that claimed the lives of 7 individuals and left 14 others injured. It was a horrific crime that incentivized governments to start treating this type of deep-rooted misogyny as a form of terrorism, which is understandable considering many members of the incel community glorified Elliot's actions. After all, these incel communities, who up until that point lived mostly in underground platforms, regularly advocated for acts of violence because it's the only acceptable outward expression of their own feelings. But somewhere in these incel communities, those who weren't black-pilled, those who had not yet accepted the pseudoscientific reality that they were doomed to be alone for the rest of their lives, emerged the incels that wanted to do better, become better, work on themselves to become more desirable to women and society in general. Introducing Looksmaxxing, a trend where young men strive to maximize their physical attractiveness through various methods, ranging from simple self-care to more extreme interventions like cosmetic surgery. If you're thinking this sounds like men have created impossible to achieve body standards for themselves, you're right. Kind of like how the patriarchy creates impossible to achieve beauty standards for women, which, though always ever changing, never settle on something realistic or accessible to most. So men are doing to themselves what they've done to women. Here's the kicker though. The original point of this trend was to become more attractive to women, either to improve the chances of women saying yes to them, or to become so physically attractive, women would naturally gravitate to you. But the standards they've created don't really appeal to most women, and try telling them that, they'll call you a liar. If anything, these beauty standards are kinda gay. Like a weird gay obsession that isn't inherently gay, but by an ironic twist of fate becomes inherently gay. And don't worry, I do have a point that will make sense if you try hard enough. Looksmaxxing started off as soft maxing. There's a lot of maxing, by the way. And soft maxing generally just meant basic forms of hygiene, like brushing your teeth, or grooming your body hair, or showering, washing your ass. We all know that straight men don't like to wash their ass because it's gay. But if you exfoliate, if you remove that layer of dead skin cells on top, trust me, the odors will be so much nicer. They even have a thing called mewing, which sounds like a Pokemon name, which involves tongue and jawline exercises meant to chisel their jaws. I found this guy on TikTok who either took it to the extreme or was born with very specific genetics that make his jaw look straight out of a Jaws movie. So far, so good. You know, you may even think that these are just very basic requirements for people to live in a civilized society. You know, taking care of yourself in the most basic way. Just wash. Make yourself not stink. But remember, this is an incel movement where men are very discontent with the way that they look, blaming it on women instead of recognizing their own insecurities. Mental health is a fickle game, kids. So soft maxing is the first stage, but then you have hard maxing, which takes these soft, generally basic approaches to extreme measures such as steroid use, hair transplant and plastic surgeries, penis pumping for increased size, removal of ribs for a sculpted waist, bone smashing, which involves using hammers to break bones in the face to look more masculine, starve maxing, which is a masculine, cool way of describing extreme dieting and eating disorders, edge maxing, or as I like to call it, no fapping, which is withholding sexual release to, in a pseudoscientific way that has no basis in actual science, increase testosterone levels and as a consequence, masculinity. And of course, no incel movement would be complete without a sprinkle of extreme racism in there. So you also have white maxing, which is using creams to appear more white. I'm not even going to go into this one. But at a first initial glance, without delving into these more extreme measures, one could be fooled into thinking that these are very reasonable measures for one to improve their own attractiveness. Right? Forms of a healthier lifestyle, if you will. Exercise, proper nutrition, skincare, all of the ways for men to take care of themselves. Now, back in my day, back in the early 2000s, you would call these men metrosexual, which ironically was almost used interchangeably as a form of insult, like fat. But not for me. To me, it was always metrosexuals take care of their appearance. They want to look good and present professional and handsome. But now the concept of metrosexual, which I guess had some sort of a negative connotation in straight communities, has been rebranded as, you know, alpha male to appeal to men everywhere. You go to bed at 7 p.m. and wake up at 3 a.m. because sin lives at night, and even though at 3 a.m. it's still technically nighttime, it don't matter because this is when you dunk your face in ice water, rub banana peel on your face, and use red light to some sort of super positive skin effect. And to make sure you're giving off a masculine woman getting vibe, the pickup artistry of it all, you have women facilitating your routine, only ever showing their hands to signify subservience, obedience. If you do this that I'm doing right now, you will get women. And this is, I think, the more insidious form of pickup artistry. They're not telling you how to go out and get women and seduce women. They're showing you how to improve your own image so that they will come to you naturally. You're becoming a masculine god of energy that women just can't resist. But do women really like these visuals? Let's ask Twitter. Or X. A while back, someone tweeted a picture of Ollie Murs, the singer, the before and after of a physical transformation where he lost a lot of body fat for a men's fitness cover. The post asked women to rate which version they perceive to be more attractive, and we can see there is a highly big dissonance between what men perceive to be more attractive versus what women perceive to be more attractive. If there was ever a poll to show the disconnect between the female gaze and the male gaze when it comes to the male body, let it be this post. And when the majority of women voted on the before being more attractive, you know, the less athletic version, more pudgy, if you will, instead of listening to women and the reasoning behind it, the response from some men was, oh, why are they lying? Because in the Manosphere, to attract women, it's almost law that you have to follow the beauty standards created by men, not women. Does that not sound gay? because it sounds pretty gay to me. And listen, there is some truth to it that some of these methods make men more attractive to women. I mean, I don't speak for women, but I think I can confidently say that every woman out there would prefer a man who showers and who brushes his teeth and who takes care of his appearance, is not walking around like an oily slob loser who lives in his mom's basement and is instead presenting himself as an independent grown man who is independent and thinks for himself and has emotional range and emotional maturity and the ability to understand that women are people and therefore should be treated and classified as people, not servants, not sex objects, not walking fleshlights. But as the answers of this Ollie Murs poll show, when taken to the extreme, these measures actually have the opposite effect. If your aim is to look like the before, suddenly you may be seen as a gym-obsessed freak who counts calories every day or weighs every piece of food that goes into your body. And more often than not, those men who are obsessed with maintaining these high standards for themselves tend to project those same standards to the people they're with. So they tend to chastise women more if they don't work out every day or also calorie count. It's impossible to go out for a meal with them because they'll be asking the waiter if it's cooked in olive oil or super virgin olive oil or just a spritz of avocado oil. I don't know, I'm just saying words. In trying to look hot and optimal for women, you end up making yourself look like a prick. Because once men gain a ounce of confidence, suddenly they become judge, jury, and executioner of what looks good on other people. Now actually, scratch that. Men don't need to be hot to be judgmental. Just recently, I've noticed a torrent of abuse hurled at Bella Ramsey, who stars as Ellie in The Last of Us, for not being attractive. This is, of course, because Bella doesn't follow the acceptable Western standards of beauty, not to mention that they've come out as non-binary, which is another Pandora's box of hatred that we could unpack in hours of conversation. But men are nothing if not consistent in their misogyny. You don't even have to pick someone who doesn't follow the Western standards of beauty. Just look at Sydney Sweeney, who is one of the best examples of a Eurocentric type of beauty, which in Western societies is the end-all be-all of white women, who posted a video on our Instagram of an entourage of, let's be honest, probably average, downright ugly-looking men, filling her pages with insults to her appearance as if she's not a 10 in all of their books. Because ultimately, in a way, to incels, it doesn't really matter how attractive you are or how attractive you are deemed as in the society that you live in. Every woman is fair game to insult and to attack if they don't conform to your expectations of what women should want. If you don't want them, you're automatically a trash, ugly, a loser, a 2. Imagine calling Sydney Sweeney, who by all intents and purposes is the definition of beauty in the Western world, a 2. And you're probably just an overweight basement dweller who's never even kissed a girl by the age of 50 and just lurks in parks staring at girls who are barely of age, if of age. The ironic thing is that most of these men would never even dare say any of these things to their faces, which is why the incel communities live mostly in underground online spaces. And this violent hatred for women makes me wonder sometimes, do they even like women? Gay men seem to like women more than straight men do, and women tend to be more comfortable around them. Perhaps it's because we treat them as human beings, not as walking fleshlights. But back to the beauty standards that men have created for themselves, and how they've convinced themselves that this is what women want. No doubt there will still be the pick-me's who really just want men to be this maximized version of what a man is supposed to be, but most of them will probably just look for a partner, a human being, not a portable advert for the latest TikTok trend on how to shred body fat and max out on looks.
Men think that this is the female gaze. And the existence even of the female gaze is debatable and muddled, and that's a conversation for another time. But for anyone confused, this is the male gaze. Chris Hemsworth is a very attractive man, but this is for men. All of the shirtless muscle shots in the MCU, that's a male power fantasy, not a female sexual fantasy. Because yeah, tons of women are attracted to him, but this is not for us.
Ironically, the standards that emerged from a highly homophobic community of men appeal mostly to gay men. Okay, for all the straight people out there, I'll let you in on a little secret. Gay men have really high body image and beauty standards, and most of them follow what Looksmaxxing is doing. Masculine energy, peak physical shape, 4% body fat, good hairlines, chiseled jaws, chiseled abs, small waist, the list goes on and on. It's really toxic. But it's also not surprising. These are beauty standards created by men who incels use to attract women, even though they refuse to listen to women when they tell them that this is not what they want, this is not what they prioritize. Sure, good looks are important, but definitely not the priority number one. And gay men only find this attractive for like one-night stands, because once you that body and realize the personality is akin to a wooden door, you're out the door. In search of a man that actually registers as a human being. Gay men prioritize these looks for quick sexual releases, but they're not the required standard for a lifelong commitment. And this is not to say that hot men don't live happy partnerships. It's the obsessing over the looks that makes your personality go because obsessing with the way you look makes you shallow. It makes you a prick. It makes you uninteresting to talk to, whether you're gay or straight. But this is also a money-making scheme that these role model influencers have found online, where they pump out these regimens and these programs which, just DM them gains or whatever, and they'll send you the program for a price. You can sign up to their hustler universities where you'll get tips on how to make money and how to improve your looks for a very hefty price as well. They're selling you this aesthetic, promising you that ultimately this is what will get you women, and young, vulnerable men fall for it because, these underground communities tend to glorify the stupidest of people. And it's the very marketable nature of this movement that has perhaps brought Looksmaxxing so into the mainstream and made it so widespread across social platforms, mainly TikTok. And I'd even venture saying that some of these top role models that are selling you this fantasy and this lifestyle aren't really followers of that lifestyle themselves. They just know what sells and how to present this very curated image of what it is appeals to discontent men. The cosmetics industry is incredibly lucrative because it plays on beauty standards set for women, so naturally Looksmaxxing is also going to be a very lucrative industry because it does the same to men. It's just a shame that when men don't hit those beauty standards, they resort to violence. Women come together to abolish those expectations and standards, and men come together to bully and ultimately kill unworthy people. Yay. And because these communities are isolated, are these echo chambers that fail to register any female opinion into the conversation, they go into this vicious cycle of violence and self-hatred that somehow always elevates the biggest loser behavior as cool and attractive, when most of these men who are perceived as the true alphas, the true women getters, wouldn't even be able to get women voluntarily or consensually. Yes, I'm talking about Andrew Tate.
I always park in disabled bays. I'm not a bad person, but I'm a quick person. Most people are slow and stupid.
Andrew Tate presents himself as this hyper-masculine figure living a wealthy lifestyle, always surrounded by beautiful women, but when push comes to shove, he's being charged with sex trafficking, human trafficking, sexual abuse, with minors, intimidation of witnesses. The only way that he can get women consensually is nothing. There is no way. They're all there against their will. They're all there being used to make him money through violent means. And when they're not violent like Andrew Tate, again, they just make these very soft allusions to the presence of women in their lives, but again, always taking roles of subservience and of obedience, almost to say they want to gravitate towards these lifestyles. They want to be there to serve you because you're so masculine and attractive and your body is so perfect and you've really nailed how to make money quick through affiliate marketing and crypto and whatever else that they can't help themselves but to want to be with you. It was unearthing these gay tendencies that I realized, wait a minute, there may be a very strong element of internalized homophobia behind these growing TikTok trends. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, maybe it's privileged, maybe she was born with it, I don't know. But just look at Patrick Bateman, one of the role models of this movement who can't help but only stare at his own reflection when having sex with women. He does it all. He does the very extensive morning routine. He does the woman-hating guy talk with his friends. And he's a man with no body fat, chiseled abs, visible muscles, who takes care of himself and is a successful businessman at a very young age. The guy has done it, and he has women in his bed. And for the purpose of this argument, let's just ignore the fact that they are sex workers, because that's the only way that Patrick Bateman can get women into bed. It's not consensually, because one look at him and his personality, and no self-respecting woman would put herself through that. But again, for the purposes of this argument, let's pretend that they are there consensually. He's doing what this growing part of the incel community wants to do, which is to have sex with a beautiful woman, and all he can do is flex his own muscles in the mirror, look at his own reflection, and admire how masculine and big dog energy he's exuding while he's raw dogging these women. This homoeroticism, the fixation with the male physique, which is also one of the components of the bodybuilding. I mean, let's count the hours those guys spend admiring their own bodies in the mirror, and it probably outflanks the amount of times gays take it up the butt. And then counter that with the inherent homophobic nature of the Manosphere, and I don't know, it has to register in some way as internalized homophobia, right? But it's also deep-rooted misogyny. It's tricky because on one hand, they do hate women, but on the other hand, they're obsessed with a male physique and masculinity and man scent. Maybe it's both. Because gay men can also be very misogynistic. Let's not forget that before they are gay men, they are just men. Sorry, gays, not to put you all on blast here, but there is a very deep-rooted element of misogyny rampant in the gay community that we should address at one point or another. But back to the incels. The problem with the Looksmaxxing trend on TikTok is that it quickly evolves into violence. See, incel communities are inherently very violent. In fact, that violence is probably what distinguishes them from most of the other Manosphere subcultures. Many Looksmaxxers believe in having hunter eyes with a positive canthal tilt. The canthal tilt is the angle between the inner and outer corner of the eyes, along with pursed lips and hollow cheeks, which translates into a dominating stare women can't possibly resist. There's even this guy that went viral a while back on TikTok that had the hunter gaze. You know, he had that very attractive, impossible to resist gaze. I don't know if women were taking the piss out of him, if they were just joking around, but I think he fully convinced himself that he had really nailed the look. And in some ways, they like to equate themselves to actual predators, failing to understand that behavior is deeply animalistic, void of consciousness, driven purely by instinct. Or maybe that's the appeal to them. Shedding away what makes us people, emotions, which they consider gay, and reverting back to our biological nature, the male biology and the animal kingdom, where more often than not, males are predators and women are homemakers. And of course, breeding machines. Yeah, a lot of these things could be avoided if they bother to speak to literally any woman out there and listen to what women actually want and find attractive. Turn those ears into listening antennas instead of bullshit receptors for other dudes. So when men don't max out on their looks or fail to achieve these high standards created by other men, they're chastised, called weak and feminine, unworthy of being men, encouraged to commit acts of violence, not just against women who they, inherently blame for their problems and hate as a consequence, but violence against themselves. They're called who are feminine, weak, and submissive, and are bullied beyond belief. This also causes the male loneliness epidemic, where men feel like they can't talk to anyone about their feelings or their isolation, because those things are admonished, perceived as a sign of, once again, femininity, which to violent incels is the worst possible thing you can be, because they hate women, so any feminine trait whatsoever is disgusting, inferior, unworthy of carrying male genetics. And these echo chambers of hate quickly devolve into real-world violence, where no one is safe. Women are public enemy number one, gays are inherently sexually deviant, and even active heterosexual men are a target because of envy. And the worrying aspect of all of this is how widespread of a mainstream trend this is becoming, because some aspects of it, as we touched on earlier, can be seen as absolutely normal. Again, let me point to the fact that basic hygiene should be a commonality among everyone, regardless of background or gender or whatever. Just brush your teeth and have a shower. But men have the self-control of a hyper-reactive dog on acid, and they can't help themselves but to take it to the extreme. Men create impossible to achieve body standards. They obsess over them, isolate themselves from any rhyme or reason, and then commit acts of violence when these standards are not followed. It's just deeply ironic that most of these beauty standards are very, very gay. And that, my friends, is the gay fixation of the Manosphere. What do you think? Am I reading too much into it? Let me know in the comments down below if this is registering to anyone else or if I'm just lost in translation. Maybe I went too deep and I focused on the wrong aspects of the Manosphere. But hey, there's plenty of time to focus on other trends and elements of the Manosphere. Some of them may even be so subtle that no one associates them with the Manosphere, while they could be perceived as being part of the Manosphere. Like, for example, I think that the tradwife movement is an extension of the Manosphere. I think that TERFs are doing the work for the Manosphere. There's so many aspects to pick and choose from that, yeah, we could be here all day if we were to do a proper deep dive on all of them. So let me know in the comments down below, what should I go into next? Was this a big waste of time? God, I hope not. Also, make sure to like and subscribe if you like this video. We post content every week. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, stay stupid, and stay stuttering. Bye, guys.